Hey everybody, this is Dominic DeAngelo, WrestleZone.com, and today's date is October 28th, 2021. And I'm happy to present to you guys today the very first episode of MLW Fusion Fight Report. So if you're not familiar, I happen to not only write for WrestleZone, but I do write for MLW as well, doing their television recaps. So I've been following it, Major League Wrestling, for the better part of 2 years and then some, because even before I started writing for them, which was over 2 years ago, I watched the show and I was a big fan of it. And I'm still a big fan of it. Honestly, from a week in and week out perspective, it is the tightest wrestling product going today. And I'm going to give a little 101, I guess, if you will, about MLW a little bit and just kind of my overall perspective and viewpoint of it and why I do like the show so much. And how they present pro wrestling. Because even right now, so the show is called MLW Fusion. Now it's called MLW Fusion Alpha. But even way back when it started off as MLW Underground, Court Bauer and his crew at the time, it was very much had like some ECW vibes, early ROH vibes, and that new kind of wave of high flying talent where it wasn't all the your typical WWE prototypes. They were really on the early cutting edge of younger and more svelte talent, where it's the Bryan Danielsons that you would see, the Sanjay Dutts, CM Punks. He had a very intriguing storyline starting off in Major League Wrestling with Raven. That was such a fun thing to cover too at the time. But so MLW was able to, 1 second there. So MLW was able to kind of give a lot of that Extreme Championship Wrestling vibe at the time, because they had stars from Sabu to Jerry Lynn to Sinister Minister, Mikey Whipwreck, Sandman, Just Incredible, Steve Corino, Terry Funk, Dusty Rhodes, all participated in the early days of Major League Wrestling. And so then it ended up, a lot of these guys would kind of be the main eventers, but then you would have these opening matches that would present a lot of younger stars like a Christopher Daniels, as I mentioned, a Sanjay Dutt, Bryan Danielson. CM Punk was right in the thick of things. There are plenty. Even a Matt Striker made an appearance way back when. If it's fascinating to go back and look and see like stars that showed up. Even Crowbar was there. Devin Storm. A lot of these guys kind of cut. TJP way back, who's still with MLW. It was cutting his teeth in Major League Wrestling back in 2003, 2004 time period. But anyways, what I'm getting at is it eventually turned into MLW Fusion. Once they did the restart, the one shot that they had back in 2018, it turned into Major League Wrestling Fusion, was their weekly television show that they started putting on. And Fusion, the goal for Fusion was to live up to that name and the different diverse set of talents that would perform and aid or that would wrestle in Major League Wrestling. And so you had luchadors and you had hybrid wrestling, and they even used that term way back in the underground days. But so it's been a very big part of Major League Wrestling's identity since it started. And so Fusion was always kind of showcased that. You would have these stars like a Myron Reed, who, if you're not familiar with, is one of the top, like, just insanely talented wrestlers going right now, who is smart to the business as well from a historical perspective. If you talk to him, if you ever talk to him or have seen an interview with him, he's he kind of keeps that balance of character, but he also is true to himself. So it's like, and he doesn't break storylines. Like, even in interviews, like he'll stick to the guns about, hey, this is kind of the perspective, but he'll be organic and natural and genuine with you. So Myron Reed is very great talent. So, but you have a Myron Reed facing like somebody from what's the name of the promotion there? The OWE, like Lindemann, and SEMA was there for a little bit as well. But you have talents like that coming in. You have LA Park, La Parka, if you're familiar more with his WCW work. He's there as a big name star. Luchador, his sons are there. So I could go on with all the names that, MLW brings in. And now you have a guy like Davey Richards and a stalwart like Tom Lawler, who's been there, who reportedly might be leaving soon. But then you have super heavyweight guys now like Calvin Tankman and Jacob Fatu. Holy smokes. We'll get into him very much so throughout the course of this series. Another guy, one of my favorites, is Alexander Hammerstone, Alex Hammerstone, as he goes by now. And just if you want to see like an epitome of like what Fusion is in a lot of ways, Alex Hammerstone is the flag bearer for that, because he's got that pro wrestler look. Like what anybody, just a casual fan, if they were to think pro wrestler, they would see Alex Hammerstone and they'd be like, okay, that's a pro wrestler, no doubt about it. But not only with Hammerstone, is he's got almost like everything combined. He's the total package in a lot of ways, because he has the athletic ability to pull off great matches. He's got the storytelling ability. He's got the mic ability. He's got the look, like I just said, and he's able to work with all these different styles that I've been talking about. So he kind of epitomizes it. And let me say right now, MLW Fusion Alpha really epitomizes fusion, the term fusion overall for a wrestling product. And I will speak it into this manner, because what is so fascinating about what's going on right now is that you have these factions or fight teams, and that's what's really cool about Fusion too and MLW, is they use all these terms like wrestlers, fighters. They don't, it's not none of that, terminology that's WWE Orwellian or anything like that. It's very sports oriented. And that's what you want to see. That's why we tune into this pro wrestling, is because it feels like a sport, and it's a perfect amalgamation of sports, violence, fighting, obviously, and then even for like other perspectives is comic books, good versus evil, great storytelling like that. What's going to happen next? What's the continuity of storytelling? All that stuff. Anyways, I'm kind of going off track and all over the place here, but there's a lot I want to touch upon on this very first episode for you guys. But overall, like from what is being presented is very across the board pro wrestling, but at its core, sports like feel, fight like feel, big fights, big moments, headline matches, and the art of promotion of that as well. So where I'm going with this is that you have all that stuff at its core is that, but all these outside stuff is there too, from like the different styles, like a notable genre like luchador, or the unique style that Myron Reed brings to the ring. You have the MMA, very much an MMA style, because you have a guy like Tom Lawler. You have guys like a Bobby Fish, who's very into kicking and stuff like that, who shows up. He's not obviously he's with AEW, but there's a lot of different guys that come in there and do that kind of work and get that King Mo, Alex Kane, all like, suplex oriented, very much like that. Then you have technical wrestlers like a Davey Richards coming in and laying that groundwork. Richard Holiday is very much of that role too, where he's got his own unique persona and identity, which is true to life to him because he has a marketing background. So all that you see about Rich Holiday, he loves coffee, that is true to him. Same with Hammers, same with all these guys. And that's what makes this a really, really good product. Is these guys aren't like putting on a facade. Obviously it's pro wrestling, so you think, hey, crank it up to 11 kind of vibe, but this is true blue dudes like going on. And to be able to see them all these different styles and stories going together is such a cool thing to see within an hour's time, once a week. But ultimately, here's what I'm capping this. So Fusion has that identity of the core wrestling at it is, but it pulls from everything else, from all these different styles of wrestling that fans might be very interested in. For a good amount of time, they did a lot of like very hardcore stuff too, here and there, would mix it in. So they aren't afraid to shy from that if possible or need be. But also what has been very fascinating is continuity throughout the course of the wrestling world. And so what happened, if you haven't been watching, but you may be familiar with an older program on the El Rey network, Lucha Underground, And the main character, or the head honcho, the quote unquote, like, Vince McMahon, if you will, of Lucha Underground, was a guy named Dario Cueto. Well, here, he doesn't go by that anymore. He goes by Cesar Duran, and he it all ties into that past, and brings a lot of that universe over, because you have Mil Muertes, who's now King Muertes, but you also have this Dario Cueto, who clearly, like, they make it clear that he's under a different alias now, and that alias now, and he is he's got motives, and he's got like this. He loved violence in the previous promotion. He loves violence in MLW, and he has become the matchmaker, and he's like dipping his toes in plenty of water that is messing up the league and causing corruption. But so, and the way that Lucha Underground was filmed and stuff like that, if you are familiar with that product, very cinematic in a lot of ways. So MLW, while they stay true, and there's a cameraman, they acknowledge the cameraman, they don't insult the fans' intelligence with how like a WWE does, like that, watch a TV backstage at a very extreme angle that you never would watch as a human being. Or yes, or hey, that camera doesn't exist there. They don't insult the fans' intelligence. The camera's there, but there's ongoings there too. And but this had a very cinematic feel. So they're pulling from all these types of things, that what makes certain aspects of wrestling so intriguing, no matter how it's portrayed. But at its very core, it stays the sports-like and fight-like feel that what draws people to pro wrestling, and the storytelling aspect too is obviously all there. So hopefully that covers a lot of just a groundwork kind of idea of how Major League Wrestling is presented. But also, I obviously want to cover the shows week in and week out. So, and what's been going on is the Opera Cup. This is year 3 of the Opera Cup going on, because they started in 2019, in which Davey Boy Smith became the first champion since its return. So it's been gone for over 70 years. But it was in Stu Hart's home. Like, it belonged to Stu Hart, was the last winner of it. And so the Hart family brought it into Major League Wrestling in 2019, and then they had a tournament for it. NHL, the people, well, not the NHL, but the people who handle the Stanley Cup have handled the work of rebuilding, or kind of not rebuilding, but fine tuning how the trophy looks. It's all that stuff. So, but they had the opening tournament in 2019, which Davey Boy Smith defeated Brian Pillman Jr. in the finals, and very good tournament. It's only 8 people in the brackets, but it's like overtakes over the course of time. They build the prestige to it, and ultimately, like, you win that trophy, you're going to be in line for a title shot down the road. So Davey Boy Smith won the first one. Who wins year 2? But Filthy Tom Lawler, who has been, like I said, a stalwart Major League Wrestling. He's like their Grand Slam champion in a lot of ways, or Triple Crown champion, I believe they call, because he's won the Opera Cup. He's won their MLW Battle Riot, which is a very unique take on 40-man Royal Rumble style almost of a match. And then butt pins and submissions count in there. And then he's also been their world champion. So he won the Opera Cup in 2020. And then now, obviously, we're right in the thick of it. So we actually, this week, we just closed the opening rounds of the Opera Cup. And so far we had Davey Richards defeating Tom Lawler in the opening round, which was a great match. Very, very good storytelling in that. Tom at the end was fantastic. Davey is such a presence in the ring, and it's great to see him back. He's always been one of my guys from the ROH days. I even told him in an interview I did here at WrestleZone. I was like, I saw you when I first moved to Philly back in August of 2010, and at the 2300 arena. So it was pretty neat to actually go to the 2300 arena and see like him fighting the Opera Cup as well. And so he's been a guy that's I always kept tabs on it. I was just, and like when I would associate ROH, I would associate with Davey Richards as my guy, like, because that's when I got in. Anyways, kind of going off track here. But Davey Richards beat Tom Lawler in the opening round, and then Calvin Tangman beat Matt Cross. Calvin Tangman is one of the next big stars in wrestling. And that's the cool thing about Major League Wrestling that I didn't even touch upon is all those stars, a lot of those stars that you see in WWE or AEW, like a MJF, like a Matt Riddle, like an Isaiah Scott. I could very much go on. All all had a stint or a decent run in Major League Wrestling before they went that way. Like Isaiah Scott, Shane Strickland, he was their champion coming on back when the MLW made their return and stuff like that at the One Shot Show, I believe, is when he first won. I'm not super positive. I'd have to go back and look because it's been a while since I looked at that. But yes, so but that's what MLW keeps up with too, is they bring talent. You know, they aren't afraid to pull from talent and take the opportunities to get them. So what we did see too was Calvin Tangman defeat Matt Cross. Matt Cross, who has ties to Lucha Underground, and they mentioned that too in the story as well. That plays into Matt Cross's past. They don't shy away from that stuff. So this week we're closing it out with two matches, two very intriguing matches, two new AEW signings: Lee Moriarty versus Bobby Fish, who happened to have a match on AEW Rampage not too long, a couple weeks back, and Bobby Fish won that. So Lee Moriarty, who I very much like a lot too, AEW obviously likes him because they signed him. Same with Bobby Fish. They opened the show this week, and but let me say first how they if you're not familiar too, Alex Hammerstone defeated Jacob Fatu, who both guys had a 2-year reign with each of their respective belts. So Alex Hammerstone was the national openweight champion, while Jacob Fatu was the world heavyweight champion. Both held their belts for over 2 years, and they collided at Fightland. Alexander Hammerstone beat Jacob Fatu, and so he was the double champion. So I believe it was just last week is when Hammer turned in his openweight belt to Cesar Duran. And so the announcement was made before this week's Fusion that there will be a ladder match to determine the new national openweight champion. And it will include Alex Shelley versus Myron Reed versus Zenshi versus Alex Kane and a wild card in the match. I was mixing up with Fightland because Myron Reed, who was the middleweight champion, fought Aries and Aramis and Tajiri, who is the new middleweight champion right now. So that's pretty cool too. And they work with Noah, Major League Wrestling. They've worked with AAA, Lucha Libre, IWA Puerto Rico. Savio Vega is a big part of the Major League Wrestling brand. And he's such a smart mind for the business too. But so that's how the show kicked off. Is Cesar Duran made that announcement. In comes King Muertes, who happens to be the IWA Caribbean champion after defeating Richard Holiday. He says, "Hey, I fulfilled what you wanted. Now you got to give me what I want." And Cesar Duran hands him this box that has a skull on it. And it's very Pulp Fiction because he opens it up and it's like this glowing kind of light, and like Muertes is infatuated with it. And the show kicks off. And then we get right to this match: Lee Moriarty versus Bobby Fish. Really good match. Great storytelling in regards to Bobby Fish working the leg of Lee Moriarty. And Lee really tries to utilize his speed and everything like that. And he ultimately gets locked in Bobby Fish's fish hook leg lock and submits. So really good match. Very much. It was cool because that same night was that Fusion aired, AW Dynamite aired, and CM Punk fought Bobby Fish. And it was cool to see a lot of like him working the leg of CM Punk. So like Bobby Fish sticks with that game plan, and that played a big part of that story too. But ultimately, CM Punk won that one. So Lee Moriarty doesn't advance, while Bobby Fish advances to the next round. And Bobby Fish was he played to the crowd, but he was ultimately the heel because he did some underhanded stuff and things like that during the bout. What they've been promoting throughout the evening was that Calvin Tangman would be in action against Gino Medina, who I love. Gino Medina, by the way. He, if you're like looking for somebody that has unique kicking style and is really crisp with them, Gino is the man at it. Like he's really, really good. He's like my favorite kicker in all of wrestling, if you will. So they were plugging that. Then what we had next. Like I said, Rich Holiday lost the IWA Puerto Rican Championship to Caribbean Championship to Mil Muertes or King Muertes. And he will try to get his retribution in the War Chamber, which is War Games, basically. And they have their fight team. So it's going to be the Hammerheads, Team Hammers, who he has two partners with him, and Richard Holiday and EJ Naduka, who I'll talk about here soon, with two other partners, mystery partners, facing Contra Unit. One of the most badass faction in all of wrestling right now is Contra Unit. They are such a good team. Like, it's like they're vicious, ruthless, mean. There's like, their music is like classic in ways, but it's also like, it's nothing you could really get behind. And just like, oh man, there's Contra's music. Like, you know what the bad shit's gonna happen. But it's like that music that's like, okay, I can get behind this. I want to cheer for these guys. It's like heelish. It's heel music. That's the way to put it. Yes. But so that's what's going to happen in the War Chamber on November 6th. Those are fun ones. I didn't even mention the Von Erichs. The Von Erichs are like, is basically my favorite babyface tag team in all of wrestling. So there's a lot of play to history in Major League Wrestling as well. Von Erichs being one of the many, but they are. And you want to talk about like genuine and organic, like, and just being authentic. The Von Erichs are there, man. They are there. Ross and Marshall, like, they're the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and that's what you see on the television. So, anyways, okay. So, speaking of EJ Naduka, if you aren't familiar with EJ Naduka, he was Ezra Judge in WWE, and then he was released. They didn't utilize him that much at all, really. He never got his chance to shine. So MLW scooped him up right away, and he is already a presence. If the battle riot that they had several months back, he cleared house in there, and he was super over with the Philadelphia crowd. I got to interview him here for WrestleZone, and we talked about that in that Vibe of Philly. And I was like, man, if you're getting cheered in Philly, that's a good sign. He was grateful for it too. And like, you know, he's got that big man look and everything like that, and he's got great look and great presence. And so it was neat to see him fit in the MLW crowd and him get a huge reaction like he did too. So he is partnering up with Alex Hammerstone and Richard Holiday, like I said. What happens here is he's outside with Emilio Sparks. If you're familiar with Renee Paquette's podcast, I believe he produces that. I want to say he produces the New Days podcast. I could be wrong. I think he does. And there's another one he also produces too, but he was really good friends with Brody Lee. I got to see him at Wally Mania when they had WrestleMania in New York City. He was a really nice guy. So it was neat to kind of, you know, see him on there too. Yes. So he was talking to him, and EJ's like, hey, me and him are brothers. Like, we work out together, all that stuff. He's like, but I want a title shot after all this. So it was pretty neat to see that, like, teasing for ahead of time. So yes, Tangman wins. They catch up with him backstage and asking, hey, what's the deal with, see that? And that's what I mean too, with the cameramen. They're part of the scene. They're not, you know, this invisible wall. They are there. And so they're the ones asking the questions. Hey, what do you feel about this going on? Well, what they're asking Tankman is, hey, what about this like tease of King Mo wanting you to join America Top Team with him and Alex Kane? And Tankman says, you know, they should be riding my coattails. He's like, I don't need them, everything like that. Sure enough, these guys, you know, come up from behind him and sleight of hand, they hit him with like a power cord in the eye, and he's bleeding. It's like, you know, all this stuff. So, you know, the hammer, Tankman's supposed to face, like I said, Gino Medina that later on. Ultimately, that doesn't happen. Tankman gets taken to the hospital, and even his Opera Cup chances might be at risk. And the key point about that is Alex Kane is one of the alternates in the Opera Cup. So if somebody gets hurt, the Suplex Assassin could get put in. So, hey, there's another strand to think about. Now, up next, we had a sweet segment with Los Parks. Oh my God. So the neat thing about Los Parks, it's LA Park Jr., and then El Hijo de la Park. So both his sons, they are the tag team champions as well, the MLW tag team champions. And but what they do is, it was kind of neat too, even during the pandemic, maybe even a little bit before that. LA Park did like these cooking segments. It was great. Like he would just cut heel promos while cooking in Spanish. It was awesome. And so they kind of played it back to this with Halloween coming up. They had some trick-or-treating tips, and it's basically them trashing the gringo Halloween and saying like, you don't get candy here, you get like, you know, stuff like this, and you get big candy and stuff in Mexico and stuff like that. And they make a Wu-Tang reference. I popped big for that. It was so good. I was like LA Park is talking about Wu-Tang. So good. So and then they beat up a guy dressed in a Conan mask. So just a neat kind of fun little segment that mixes it up a little bit. Speaking of mixing it up, we cut to Cesar Duran, who is on the phone. He's in a bad mood. Last week, though, he tried to get a hold of Matt Krugger, who's like this big masked mercenary enforcer for Contra Unit. And his goal this whole time, since he's kind of showed up in MLW, has been to be a thorn in Alex Hammerstone's side and try to thwart his chances at winning that world title. Well, it didn't happen. So Cesar Duran calls him into his office and is like, hey, you ever thought of maybe just kind of like, you know, looking out for yourself a little bit more? Or has that game plan changed? And Mad says, no, it hasn't changed. I'm still with Contra. I'm still going by the Contra game plan. He's like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have to do single stuff. Like you can kind of dabble into that. So like Cesar Duran's like, he's such a like slimy individual, but he plays it so well. And he's so like, it's just, I don't know. It's like seriously one of my most favorite parts of watching this show is seeing him in the mix, just because, you know, he's just up to no good, but he's also likes violence. So he's always for the best kind of matches going on too, which it's a very, very well done and well executed. And the guy is oh my gosh, he's such a great actor too. So that scene ends, and then we get something that MLW has just started doing is the women's featherweight division. So bringing in some top female talent that's in wrestling, like Willow Nightingale, like Nicole Savoy, like the Sea Stars, and Holodead, who's of Mission Pro Wrestling, which I'm a very big fan of, is Mission Pro Wrestling and how they promote their product and everything. All women product is Mission Pro, Thunder Rosa promotion. And so, but anyways, so they're getting a lot of talent mixed in there. Brittany Blake's another one as well. But what happened last week is Nicole Savoy defeated Holodead, who has a pet to a chain named Dr. Dax. And that's a cool dynamic too, where it's like, hey, it's kind of classic kind of wrestling vibe, where it's like these characters and stuff like that, creepy characters, but it's a neat element that's added into it, and I think kind of helps elevate Holodead as well. But anyways, Nicole Savoy defeated Holodead. She attacked. Well, Nicole Savoy got injured in the match, and but Willow Nightingale was on commentary, and part of the story is Holodead attacked Willow Nightingale after she was leaving commentary. So follow up to this, Mila Sparks is out in the arena area where Willow is signing autographs and interrupts and asks her about, hey, what's your whole thoughts on Holodead and stuff like that. Willow admits like, hey, she was pretty taken aback by it. She didn't expect you to attack from behind after leaving commentary, but she wants a match. And sure enough, she has Cesar Duran on speed dial, calls him up. It looks like that match is going to happen. It is going to happen on November 6th in Philadelphia. Part of their live event stuff for War Chamber and building up to all that stuff. But speaking of Holodead, Dr. Dax has a match. It is against that mercenary, Mads Krugger. Squash match here, but Dax looked revved up going in there, and it was neat little story aspects in that, because Holodead's like trying to, hey, you got to get with it, like basically yelling at her pet, like start kicking his ass here. Didn't happen, like just choke slam, or I think it was a full Nelson slam. Oh yeah, reverse full Nelson slam was what it was. Got the 1, 2, 3. Mad gets on the mic, starts chanting Contra and all this stuff. Out comes Bud Heavy, who's like this unexpected fan favorite. It was so cool to see, because he comes out there and Philly was so behind Bud Heavy. If you have not seen Bud Heavy, he's been such a great aspect of Major League Wrestling, like from the Filthy Island days, which was like a comedy kind of a week where they did like the play on the UFC island, that fight island. Well, Tom Lawler had Filthy Island, and it was just like this junk, awful show that was like put on. Dan Lambert was on commentary, and Bud Heavy was the music man. So he literally had he had a boom box that he put a tape player in, and like that's how the music would play. And then at the end, I know I'm getting off track, but I have to talk about this. Is like at the end, the Von Erichs come riding in on a Jeep because they're feeding with Tom Lawler. Like they crash into the area where Bud was. And I think Dan Lambert or Tom or whoever was on commentary is like, they killed Bud Heavy. Like they implied that he died. But it's like such a cool, it's so funny. But Bud's got that presence, and he got a big ass pop in Philadelphia. And, you know, it was neat to see him be able to come out, and like the crowd's behind him. He's like, comes out with the steel chair and stuff like that. And, you know, he tries to get on the apron. Matt charges him. He kind of resets, but as he gets back on the apron, gets booted. A match happens, and then he gets that full Nelson slammed as well and gets the 1, 2, 3. So 2 squash matches here, but a good way to build Mads Krugger back up and keep him hot. So after that, we did get the unfortunate news that Calvin Tangman was taken to the hospital, and that match between him and Gino Medina will not happen. So didn't even get to these guys yet. So if you're familiar, you know, LAX, Santana Ortiz, what had happened in TNA Homicide, Hernandez. I'm sure I'm missing plenty of faction members. I didn't follow Impact to a T back then that much, but these guys are basically LAX, but they're 5150, and it's led by Conan. And it is, you might know him as Daniel Limelight, but he's he is Rivera here, and he's great. Like if you've seen Danny Limelight's work in the ring, he's amazing athlete. He really stole the show with a lot of AEW stuff with his athleticism. Dude, he's a freaking former Marine too, by the way. But he's just as great on the mic. Like that presence, he packs a punch, and he's got that badass attitude and brings it to 5105 or 5150. I gotta get used to that. Like they did this quick segment, but it's like intense, packs a punch. They want the titles against Lost Parks, and they want Cesar Duran to make it happen. They even threaten Cesar Duran. So it's like this land of outlaws. It's just a very cool vibe. So we get some of that there. Yeah, you got to watch his stuff if you haven't seen it, because you'll get more of an appreciation for it as well. So yeah, breaking news, I kind of mentioned this already, is that Contra managed to insert a 5th member to the War Chamber on November 6th, which will be a Sentai Death Squad member, so part of like Contra unit. But Hammer has to search for two partners to join him in the EJ and Richard Holiday. So speaking of Hammer, Alicia Toot, who I've interviewed several times, I think only once since she was signed with MLW, but Alicia Toot is great because she's like just got a great presence about her, but her body language and how she reacts to the interviews and stuff like that is very, very cool. And it's like cool to see because you don't get that stuff in WWE. You don't get the personality of like the interviewer where there's somebody that you want to root for, or that you know how they're handled things. Well, Alicia too does a very good job of presenting herself as well, and reacting. She's a great, reactor, and she does a very, very good job at all that. Anyways, so they've been teasing like this, like kind of romantic tension between her and Holiday, and Holiday's like he's kind of like this. Holiday's been a heel for the better part, but he's kind of turning a little bit of face here, and like because he's showing more ring work, and he kind of does. You can tell if you look between the tea leaves. He's got some affection for Alicia too, and but he'll deny it, and he's denied it because he saved Alicia too one time from getting in a Contra foray when they were attacking Holiday, and but he comes all bandaged up like the Invisible Man as Hammer's talking, but Hammer says, "Hey, we want a tag match against Contra and stuff like that." Me and Holiday were ready to roll. Well, Holiday's all bandaged up, like I said, and he's mumbling. You can't hear what he's saying. Alicia can't hear what he said. Well, she does hear. He said something, and she slaps him. And Hammer's like, "Hey, you can't say that on TV." And Holiday closes it out with some more mumbling and stuff. It's good. Yeah. So I wanted to touch upon this. Hammerstone and Richard Holiday They're part of a fight team called the Dynasty, who was a part of that team, but MJF, and that was such a great dynamic. If there's like some past episodes available of Fusion that you can go back and watch, you got to watch MJF's run in Major League Wrestling. And because he balanced it in between like the time, he even mentioned it in AEW that he was signed to 2 companies at the time. So, but him with the Dynasty is so good. So damn good. All heels at the time. Hammerstone was like the top baby face now, but at that time, he's like was a big time heel. And it was kind of neat to see him like just organically make that transition. All right. Next up, we had the main event. It was TJP, who's been this intense heel. Like he had like this heel turn. He was teaming with Buku Dao, and then turned on him. That was Buku Dao was like his protege, and then he turned on Buku Dao, and like it started a mean streak for TJP. So TJP has really been embracing that, and he had a match with Davey Richards a few weeks back, and they had a great match. It was so good, and Davey ultimately won, but TJP was a big time heel, and it was just the Philly crowd loved to hate him. Like they were calling him TJ Pussy. It was a great chant, and like it was rocking the 2300 arena. It really was. So and he took advantage of it, man. It was great stuff. But so main event time though is TJP versus Alex Shelley, who I gotta say, like Davey Richards in ROH for me, Alex Shelley was my guy in TNA. So this was just neat to see them both be in the uppercut at the same time. But Alex Shelley cuts a promo right before he heads out. So like the stakes are there. They're right in front of your face. He's talking to Alicia Toot, but Alicia Toot's like, hey, what's your mindset? Do you get nervous? Kind of basically asking him that kind of stuff. He's like, I don't think about anything when I go out there. And he ties it in to not thinking about anything, like a mental perspective, keeping a good perspective. It plays into who Alex Shelley is, because he's like a very like, he loves pro wrestling. Pro wrestling is his game, but he's also into a whole lot of other stuff. And that I think really makes a star when you're just obviously like Tom Brady's like, hey, I love football. I'm all about football. And that's a good mentality to have too. But there's something to be said too, when you bring your outside aspects into wrestling, or it's just part of you and who you are. Alex Shelley is like really great at showing that. I mean, like it's just natural, but he goes out and I don't know. I just like the moment where he's like, oh, my music's hitting. I got to go. And he points at Alicia and he gets to it. So they get in the ring and they have another banger of a match too. This is really good stuff. Some good spots. Alex Shelley out of nowhere pulled out like a really classic kind of like head scissor spin into an Fujiwara armbar. Very notable stuff. And TJP just is innovative. Like he's so good. It's kind of neat too, because he had like a pink and black like Bret Hart did. He did a lot of kind of Bret Hartish stuff, like there's sharpshooter done in there and stuff like that. So just really, really neat stuff. The cool spot too, where Alex Shelley gives TJP a flatliner into the turnbuckle. And that's a cool spot. And what's great about it too, you can hear it mic'd up. He's like, motherfucker. He gives it to him. Man, I popped for that. So, but what happens here is Alex Shelley gets TJP in the Border City stretch, which is like an STF kind of crossface-esque move, more crossface, not STF, more crossface-esque move, if you're not familiar. And he like, TJP's trying to get to the ropes. So Alex has got his game plan is to put it, I'm like physically doing this, is to put his boot onto the ropes and like roll back and put TJP more in the center of the ring. So he locks him in the center of the ring. Well, what happens is like Alex tries to boot it and then it turns it into an angle in which like the rest back is like, or vision is like, blurred, not blurred, but just impaired because, of bodies in the way. And TJP grabs hold of the ropes and he gets the 1, 2, 3. And then, so Alex Shelley is eliminated from the tournament and TJP advances. So, and that's how the show ends, just like that. But yeah, a good episode of Fusion. I want to do something that I do with my other show here, Two Dynamite Dudes, which is my AEW show. But I want to give my MVP for the week. And who would I give it to this week? I got to say Alex Shelley. I just got to say it because I just think he did a good job. He added just a unique insertion into the program this week. And it's neat to see him just in the mix of things. And I just really like that promo at the end. It was just really well done. And the presence that he portrayed in the ring too, he takes these little moments to show who he is in the ring. And that's, you got to love that about wrestling. Like that's one of my favorite parts about wrestling, all the little details. So he did a very good job of that. So Alex Shelley is my first ever MVP of MLW Fight Report. Yes, this is the Fight Report. If you have any feedback, any questions in regards to Major League Wrestling, you can follow me on Twitter. It'll be below here at Dominic DeAngelo. You can also, I did create a Twitter account at Fight Report MLW. So follow that. Follow me on Twitter. Follow WrestleZone on Twitter at WrestleZone.com. Go to WrestleZone.com for all the wrestling news needs. And hey, if you're in the Philadelphia area, give a look to MLW War Chamber coming up November 6th. So week's time. By the time, okay, I can go over the final card and everything that they'll have at War Chamber before War Chamber actually happens. So we'll get more into that detail next week. Yeah, but I hope I kind of was clear enough about how MLW was set up and how it's kind of been portrayed. That's just my perspective thing. I'm sure there's more to it than, what just my perspective as it comes through. But yeah, I very much like this product overall. Week in, week out, it's the tightest show going. It very much plays into like not assaulting the fans' intelligence, respecting the sports like aspect, all that stuff. They do a very, very good job. And there's so many people to root for, to cheer for, to boo. So there's a lot of people that you can hitch your wagon to, be like, hey, that's my guy. Hey, I like that Bud Heavy fella. That's my dude. So there's a lot of that going in there. So Tom Lawler has been one of mine throughout the course of me watching. He's been such a good, fun character to watch. Oh man, he's been great. So, all right, guys, that'll do it for this week. You can also check out some of my work on MajorLeagueWrestling.com, MLW.com. But yeah, go to MLW Live for tickets. Go to MLW Shop if you want to check out some of their cool t-shirts and stuff like that. And yeah, follow them on Twitter at MLW. So there you go, guys. We'll do it for the first episode of the MLW Fusion Fight Report.